Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for attending today's webinar, Strategic Planning for Future Success, Maximizing Return on Investment Through Collaborative Efforts with Sanborn. My name is Emily Reitz. I am the Director of Technology at the National States Geographic Information Council. If you are unfamiliar with our organization, NSGIC exists to advance effective national coordination of geospatial information by supporting state-level cooperation. We serve as a national forum for the development of capable and future-oriented geospatial leadership. And if you'd like more information on how to get involved with us, please visit our website, nsgic.org. So brief reminders for the call today. Everybody's been muted upon entrance, and there will, I think, be time for Q&A. So please put questions into the chat box, and a recorded version of this webinar will be made available afterwards. So that will be in an email. Keep a lookout for that. And let's kick things off. Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Emily. Yeah, I really appreciate it. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for taking time today to spend a little time with us to talk about strategic planning. It's one of my favorite topics, so I'm excited that you all have taken the time. For those that don't know me, I am Jenna Levier. I'm the recent VP for State and Local Government at Sanborn. Previously, I was the Deputy State Cartographer for Arizona. So my perspective is kind of twofold on this topic. It's from a Sanborn perspective, but also from a state perspective. I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Let me get my tools. So just quick introductions. I've already given you a little bit about me. With me is Kate Hickey. I think many of you know her. She is our Chief Operating Officer at Sanborn and one of my favorite people in the world. So she is a rock star when it comes to strategic planning. So I think the next hour is going to be a lot of fun. I think we're ready. Yeah, Kate?
I think we're ready. Jen, I'm going to have
Excellent.
you give my introduction everywhere from now on.
Oh, good. So this is what we had planned for today. I think I want to preference this with, this is really a discussion. So Kate and I have a bunch of slides. We're going to talk about a few things, but we would encourage you all to come off of mute, turn on your camera, and have a discussion at any point. So if you have questions, if you have comments, no heckling, just saying, be nice. So we're going to talk a little bit about the background, like what has happened in the world of strategic planning for states, and what has brought us here. What's today's challenge? How is that different from when, GIOs started entering the mix and state programs for coordination started? What's the toolbox? How do we do this? What are the resources that are available and process? What are some considerations? What does that look like for you all? And of course, the benefits. We do have some cameo appearances from your peers and state leaders. Not all of them could join us today, so we decided that we would have previous conversations and record them. I believe we've got at least one on the call today, so we may have some ad hoc comments as well. And then the path forward, where do we go from here? So thanks again for joining us, and we will dig in.
So we thought it would be useful to set the stage a little bit. I'm sure many of you are aware of kind of what the program that launched strategic planning within the NSGIC community. The FGDC's 50 States Initiative, it's been nearly 2 decades, I can hardly believe it, since the launch of that program. And it really was the initial recognition of the importance of strategic and business planning in achieving an SDI. The CAP grants that were awarded to states, they helped fund the necessary work that went into those plans. But I think more importantly, it provided this really strong guidance and common language. I think back to the language in those guidelines all the time, and it gives us the ability to talk about these things and understand what could be some kind of esoteric ideas. But it gave us that common language for states in how to establish a vision and how to identify barriers, how to identify what the opportunities were for them out there, and provide a roadmap, an actionable roadmap toward those goals. At that time, many state GIOs or geographic information offices were in their infancy. And so the plans often were really focused on maybe establishing some baseline conditions, like, core programs, like a statewide imagery program, or, even just creating a GIO role. And things have evolved tremendously since then. I mean, some things have stayed the same, and some things, we've taken leaps and bounds from there. Jenna, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting perspective. One of the things that maybe you all don't know is that the resources from the 50 States Initiative are still available on the FGDC website. For some states that have not been in a position to renew their strategic plan, that's still a resource, as well as kind of the guidelines. So that's all still there. A lot of it's still relevant, but as Kate was saying, things have changed. And yet some things are still the same, right? So my perspective coming in as sort of the second tier of GIS leadership in a state, I had a very strong predecessor that I think many of you know, who did an amazing job. When I entered the scene, some things were the same, like funding was the same. We still had challenges with funding and with supporting the program. We still had challenges with awareness and communicating that to leadership in the state. I think that we're very good at telling our story to each other. So we still had that same challenge of telling it wider. I think even still, lots of states are still working on their maturity and their framework data sets. It's a challenge. It's an uphill, I don't want to say battle exactly, but goal to get all of the framework layers together for a state and what that process looks like. I think some of the different challenges now are, technology keeps moving and our access changes. What goal we're trying to reach changes. The number of people that can access the data and look at it and use it, good or bad, it's ubiquitous. It's across the board. So much of what we're doing now can be accessed through your phone. So citizens are getting a hold of our data sets and doing things with them. So it's different, right? We have to be very thoughtful about how the data is put together, how the data is distributed. What does that look like? In the most recent GMA from 2023, 45 states participated in the GMA, which is amazing. That it's a really great perspective. What we learned was that 24 states have some kind of strategic plan that's less than 5 years old. And I think there's kind of an asterisk with that because states do it all differently, right? And I can speak to Arizona, I can't speak to all the other states, but I would say that in Arizona, it is not a traditional process to come up with the strategic plan and the goal setting for the state. It is still valid, absolutely, and thoughtful and important, but it is not a traditional path. 8 states have a plan that's 5 to 10 years old. 13 states, it's greater than 10 years old. My guess is that those are the states that still rely on the CAP grant funding that developed their strategic plan, and 2 states don't have any. So I think that's a really interesting demographic for where we're at currently. So I'm looking forward to the results of the 2025 to see how that's changed. Before I move on, Kate, do you have anything else to add?
No, I think that's I think that's really good context for thinking about how a state would embark on it. And I think in the NISJIC community right now, there are GIOs that have been there for many, many years, and there are GIOs that are stepping into existing roles and maybe replacing someone that has retired or moved on. And I think understanding the history and understanding the drivers it's really important, no matter what stage you're in.
Agreed.
So we talk about strategic planning in kind of these general terms, and I often have conversations with NSGIC folks about, well, what is it? And I think that it's worth differentiating some of the tools in the toolbox here, because I see that there are really three different major tools. No state's plan is the same. The content that's going into it, the ideas, the input, the stakeholder feedback is different in every state, and therefore, the plan is different. But there are three kind of core approaches that we can take in working with a state. And it's really important to think about what you want as an outcome. What is your challenge? What are you trying to achieve with a planning process? And so just to review those, a strategic plan is really aimed at a high level vision and setting those priorities. So it's gathering input from your stakeholders, understanding where your strengths and weaknesses are, understanding at a super high level, what are maybe five goals, programmatic goals that you can embark on that will have a serious impact in your world, on your program, to your stakeholders. What are those most impactful things you can do? I think many GIOs I talk to, because they tend to get in this reactive mode, that there's so many demands put upon them, that you realize there are many things that your organization can do, but does that mean that you should be doing them? The prioritization is probably the most challenging thing. A business plan often follows a strategic plan. So maybe there are 5 core programmatic impactful goals that are identified by a strategic plan. And a business plan is telling you how you're going to get there. So how much is it going to cost to achieve that goal? Who are the resources, or what are the resources that need to be involved? Who's going to be responsible for those actions? Do they have do they have that in their job description to perform those actions? How long is it going to take? Who do you need to convince? So this is really your list of actions. And then finally, something that I feel like gets tossed around a lot is ROI analysis. And we could spend a whole webinar just on ROI analysis. And I think, it's in the title of our webinar today. And I think some of it is, getting the biggest return on your investment from this planning process. And then it's also the ROI of your program at large. How do you do both of those things? And an ROI analysis, if done properly, is really quantifying. That's the key word there, quantifying the value and the impact of an investment. So that investment might be narrowly focused on an initiative, like maybe it's a recurring state-funded high-resolution imagery program. What is the return on the state making that investment? Or it can be, a broad, quantified measure of the value of an entire program. I mean, we recently worked with Megan in Indiana on a value and benefit study for the state of Indiana and quantified the value of the GIO in the state. And there are different approaches, but the key word there is putting numbers to paper. It's a very research intensive process. To build that business case, you have to find very specific and very defensible examples of how that investment is going to directly impact critical activities. Another way of measuring it would be like, let's say, without that investment, in the absence of that investment, let's say imagery, what is the direct impact on labor across all of your stakeholders, or tax revenues, or efficiencies, or enormous, very hard to measure things like public safety of citizens. So it's thinking about what value does it bring, or in the absence of that investment, what is the negative impact? So these are all, it's just the goal in going through these is really to make sure that you are thinking about what is it that you want at the end of a planning process.
Agreed. Yeah, I think it's, oh, I got stuck. There we go.
And then thinking about the process, if we think about all the things that a GIO has to keep in mind, it's an enormous spectrum of responsibility. And, as I mentioned earlier, it's very easy to be in reactive mode. I think often that's what we hear from GIOs is one of the main reasons they want to do a strategic plan is because they feel like they are reacting to demands rather than driving strategy. That the process is really designed to put you back in that driver's seat, allow you to be proactive, allow you to be communicating, where are we headed, team? This is where we're headed, and I need you on board. And I've always thought of it as the best analogy for this prioritization and clarity on what you need to do is that old analogy about the big rocks, the pebbles and the sand, and that the strategic planning process is really about finding those big rocks that represent the most important things you need to do. If you're paying attention to the sand, you'll never get to the big rocks.
And it's very easy in today's environment to want to pay attention to all of it. So I think it helps to focus programs, efforts, be more effective through that intentional and deliberate act. I think that's really, really important, that thoughtful process.
So Jenna, do you want to dive into some of the benefits and then maybe that launches us into some of our cameos here?
Sure. I think we all think about what we want, right? How we want our programs to go, how we want our engagement, whether you're in the private sector or in the public sector. And where strategic planning, return on investment analysis, those business plans, where they really shine, right, is when you can see improvement in engagement and when you can get really actionable feedback from your community, people that want to contribute, that want to participate. I think there's a lot of benefit, and we can do more with more thoughts, right? I'm a big believer in the diversity of thoughts and feedback, and I think that engagement's really critical. It's huge in progressing forward. Obviously, being more thoughtful gives us improved communication and messaging and branding. This is what our purpose is. We have, you go through a strategic process and you can really give some thought into what you want that message to be and how you can maximize your impact. Kate's hit on this a bunch of times through the process and determining the right tool. Where do we put our efforts? So we need that framework. We need to understand how we can be most impactful and utilize our time wisely. We need to know where we're going. So it gives us that roadmap so we're not just reactive. And we can stay on the road, right? We can keep moving forward. I think that's really important. And anymore, we all have to justify our existence no matter where we sit, right? And where we want to invest. So it really gives us that framework to be able to defend our decisions, to be able to champion what the needs are. I think all of those things are really important. I think that builds momentum in a state. I think that builds momentum in a program, and it can be as small or as big as we have the arms to wrap around it, right? I think there are increment steps across the way. So as I go to the next, Kate, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I was just going to add one more, just because I hear from a lot of GIOs that, at the moment the plan is completed and approved, there's this moment of clarity about where we're headed. But the other benefit that is not listed here, but I think is critically important, is it gives you this framework for measuring your success and your progress as you go forward, and for continuing the conversation. So I think, one of the recommendations we always make is come back to your strategy, come back to your business plan annually and look at what you've accomplished and look at, do any of these goals need to be recalibrated? Have circumstances changed? Or, what's getting in the way of accomplishing them? But taking that moment to reflect on the successes and to think about, is a detour required, or is it full speed ahead? That's an important one as well.
I agree. I think assessment, just reflective time is important. My favorite picture of Kate. So we talked to our friends in several states about, just to offer perspective. We thought it would be helpful for this group to hear from them. So this is our cameo section. I'm just going to go ahead and hit play.
So Mark, I know that you and I talked about doing strategic planning for probably a couple years, every time we saw each other at NISJIC, before we really jumped into it and started scoping it and thinking about, how it would be useful to Michigan. I'm curious, can you articulate sort of what was the driving need for it? What was the challenge that you thought strategic planning might help you overcome in this state?
One of the big things is we hadn't done a strategic plan for a while, and it had been about a dozen years, and we really wanted to get an idea from our GIS community, what are some of the things that was top of mind with them, but also working through the exercise of a strategic plan to really take that information and prioritize what it was. So one of the big things we had to do in the beginning was figure out what we wanted to focus on around the strategic plan, because we focused specifically on statewide GIS coordination. So a lot of our objectives were through gathering information on how statewide GIS coordination was going and what things, that our office could be doing or putting in place to continue to move it forward.
I think Mark brings up a really good point, right, Kate, about, there's this huge bucket. And we could call the whole thing strategic planning. But I'm not sure that's as effective as determining where you want to focus, where you feel the planning process is really going to be impactful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say
so
that,
Mark, I know that
Sorry.
Often a GIO will begin a process, or at least some of the initial conversations will be
the driving force.
It's the Wild West. I'm so
sorry. Megan's just eager to share her knowledge here. I was just going to say a GIO will go into the process, with a strong idea about what they want to focus on. But I'd say without fail, they'll learn something new along the way that, through the stakeholder engagement and feedback, perspective can change and new priorities might bubble up.
Agreed. And before I hit play, Megan is with us on the call today. So we're going to listen to this and then we're going to go to Megan and see if she wants to add anything or just denounce the whole thing. And maybe I can control the slides. We'll see. We'll see how I do.
For us, for a strategic plan was, I started my position in 2018 and had a very small staff, 1.5 full-time team members. And we were given the responsibility to figure out how to go find money because we were not funded. And we also had major projects like imagery and the data harvest and things that we were pulling in volunteers from different organizations to try and help us with. And the processes were not going as smoothly as they could. Thankfully, it wasn't a people problem. It was really a technology issue, which is unusual. Technology and process issue. So we had the people who were willing to help the program, so we didn't have the technology and the processes in place. So we needed support for that. We also knew that there were a lot of state agencies that needed to grow their geospatial capabilities, and they were asking us to advance. So there were a lot of things changing in state. And then COVID happened, and shortly after the start of COVID, we kicked off the strategic planning initiative, and we weren't sure how it was going to work, but it was necessary for us to know what to do next. Okay, we're in this situation. This was the office that I had inherited. And now what do we want to do with it? We have these amazing programs. How do we want to advance them? And so we did a strategic plan to help us understand what was important and maybe how to get from where we were to where we wanted to be.
Megan, before I go wild on the slides and hit something I don't mean to, would you like to come off mute and show your beautiful face? Do you have anything to add?
No, I don't think so. That sounded pretty smart. Which is good. You never like to hear yourself talk. But the one thing that I left out, maybe should have mentioned, is the pull from the GIS community for us to have a plan. I'm naturally a planner, so this was felt like a good thing for me, but not everybody is. And to bring in that community, people were like, yeah, let's talk. Let's see. People always want to tell you what they think. So that was a huge piece of, we were getting some input, but it wasn't consistent. And so we wanted to be sure we were getting broad input, and doing the strategic plan process was a great way for us to do that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that's true. You know, if you ask, you will get feedback, or at least if you provide the space to do that, you get really productive input. I think that's super helpful.
I think before you hit next on the slides, you know, one thing I think we learned in Indiana and other states as well is that often programs are operating in a bit of a false economy, right? You know, Megan mentioned relying on volunteer effort, relying on resources that are not sustainable and not accounted for, you know, in any budget, in any org chart. And yet, you know, the program continues to succeed because of smart people like Megan leading the way, but it's not painting the picture of what it actually takes to propel the program forward and achieve those goals. So I think that's been one of the most valuable things that has come out is really, you know, quantifying what it takes to successfully run a program.
Hey, you reminded me of something that I left off. When I came into this role and we were seeing transition across the country, there was a lot of retirements, a lot of people changing roles. And because I'd been here for a while, I knew some of the people that were the key players that were quite honestly behind handshake agreements of how to host data and how to do open data portals. And there were not documented processes. And what we've now determined we're going to call governance was not something we talked about. So we had a lot of archaic data, and it wasn't being well managed. And those people were moving on or retiring, or we were getting bounce back emails and stuff. So that was happening too. I forget about that now, but it was a difficult time to remember, hey, I need imagery from 2010. Who has that hard drive?
Mm-hmm.
Not a good way to do data governance. So
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent point. It's hard.
the driving force.
Of course. See, Wild West. All right. We're going to hear from Natalie Lee next.
We have had 2 strategic plan initiatives in recent history, and they had slightly different drivers. Similarly to what Megan was talking about in the GIO's office, we had to create a strategic plan because we had this major change in office structure where it had been Susan as the GIO, as a one-woman shop, functioning in that role. Now she had me come aboard, and we had this big program, NG 911, to meet. And so we wanted to be intentional about our growth to make sure that we were meeting the needs of the moment, but then calculating for what we wanted to do long term so that anything we did in the short term was going to feed into what we were going to do later on.
Do you have thoughts, Kate, before I move to the next slide and mess everything up? You're good? Okay, you're still muted. Yeah.
I'm good.
Okay. So I think one of the other things to point out, and I think Erin's going to speak to this a little bit, is that there's still challenges. It's not an easy process. It's still, you know, it's different for everyone.
We have had 2
Nope.
strategic.
See? There we go. Then
Were you surprised at how much work it was for you?
Yes, yeah. It's hard for folks to let things go, but that's the part of doing the strategy, is because we've all decided, we've all gotten together based on, our community and, a deep dive and of analysis of what needed to be done. We all got together to decide this, and then prioritizing that's been a challenge.
Yeah, I remember having the conversation with Erin about not just last week, but back when we were doing the plan, about how much work it was. And I think it speaks to that these plans are really the epitome of a collaborative project. I mean, it doesn't get more collaborative than that. I mean, from a consultant role, the consultant is providing maybe guidelines and structure to a process, and helping manage a process forward. Consultant may be providing, perspective on what's happening with other states, or perspective on what's happening with the industry. But really, the meat of the content that is coming from input from the GIO and the stakeholder community. It's really coming from those ideas and that concerns and desires for where that stakeholder community is going to go, and what the real challenges are. So no consultant can pull that out of thin air. That needs to come from you. And I think it is a lot of work. And I think that's one of the things we wanted to communicate today, not scare anyone off that it's a lot of work, but that, that process, if it's not deeply engaging, if it's not that collaborative, then you're not really getting the best return. You're not getting recommendations that are going to be relevant and impactful in your state. So I think embarking on the process is embarking on a little, little GIO therapy here, in terms of looking honestly at what needs to be addressed. And I would say that everyone that we've talked to, says that the work is well worth it, that return is great, but there is an investment of time and thought.
Yeah, I would add that there's also a level of engagement that you have to get folks in your communities to pause for a minute and contribute differently. Mm-hmm. Everybody has day jobs. Everybody, including the GIO, has other things, right? But convincing everyone that the time is well spent and it's important to take a pause. I think we learned that in our personal lives. And it's harder to implement in our public lives and in our work. But the investment is definitely well worth it. Though it's challenging for sure. So, okay, I think I got there. Did I get that right? Yes, I think so. So we wanted to dig a little deeper into the benefits. What does that look like? Because we've talked about why and some of the challenge of doing. So what do you get? What does that look like for a state?
One of the big things that did come out of it was the, feedback from the GIS community of striving for more open GIS data across the state. That's actually one of the recommendations that moved up by the consensus group, up from a priority 3 to a priority 2. So those are things with the new advisory group that we'll be working through. We're going to use that plan to work through with the advisory group as well. So having this in a plan and a document will help kind of keep us moving forward on what some of those priorities were from the GIS community. And then we'll figure out a cycle of, when we kind of let this like a 3 to 5 year plan. It's probably more on the 5 year end, but as we get into year 4 or so, do we do another exercise on, refreshing the plan? One of the big things.
Oh, there it goes. We'll see. We have more. I need to practice.
I specifically got out of it was there was a lot of unspoken or unquantified labor and process that needed to be accounted for to get what you wanted done. And sometimes that isn't said. You want to do something there, you focus on the end goal. And in order to get there, there are the other pieces that someone who's qualified in strategic planning can kind of push you on to say, okay, well, what about this? What about these elements that are part of getting to that end goal? And those are the pieces that are especially helpful, and you don't know at the beginning what those are necessarily.
One more.
It's amazing to be able to quantify how we are answering questions and just to centralize all that business data about how we serve our customers and our patrons, our users. And then we can make better informed business decisions off of that information. And that in itself is extremely valuable. And I'm just kind of touching on one small piece of what we've decided to take on in the goals that we defined and in all the work to support that. And so it's been worth it, but we're turning a very big ship into a different direction. So it's taking a lot longer than we all had anticipated, but it's worth it.
Sure. And having those metrics are worth it. You can tell a better story.
Absolutely. We can tell a better story. We can reconcentrate our resources to the right areas. We can, it's almost like the canary in the coal mine. We've had a lot of questions about this. Maybe we're not putting the data out there in the right manner, or maybe we need to do some outreach to that community. Something's going on there. There's a lot of confusion, or maybe, we just need to do a training on that specific data set and so on and so forth. Like, why are we concentrating all of our time on this one thing that we don't think we should be concentrating all this time on, and how can we improve the process? So it's extremely valuable.
Kate, before we move on to the next slide, or as I move on to the next slide, we do have a message from Kim Jackson in the chat. She's wondering about the average start to finish time for a strategic plan process. Obviously, I think most communities do have survey fatigue. I think everyone goes there. And she doesn't have a council. So that's kind of the context.
Yeah, I mean, I think
it's
the annoying answer is, that it depends. But I think that, largely the schedule is driven by how much engagement we want to do with the community. So, and how many sort of feedback cycles. So I think we've done strategies in 2 months before. We've worked with the state. That's very unusual. That's very fast, because there's not much time for a large stakeholder community to provide their input and to have that engagement. There've been others that have taken a year, because they're multiple cycles and iterations, and months of engagement up front. So I would say on average, it's probably in the 6 month time frame, 6 to 9 month, but that can be accelerated if there are particular goals. Especially, for example, with an ROI analysis, if a number is needed to justify an investment, that process can be accelerated. But it does mean that that we would need focused attention from those who we're working with on the state side. And it's the survey part is just one tool. I think I want to make it clear that engagement goes well beyond a survey as well. A survey is obviously a good way to reach a broad spectrum of folks, but the engagement goes into pretty in-depth interviews and conversations, as well as facilitated workshops where people are often hearing about each other's challenges and use cases for the first time within a state. So it's those are all factors, but be happy to talk more with you, Kim.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent segue, right, to the path forward. I think it's really important to recognize that there is no one size fits all, and how there are trusted methodologies that we have learned really work to tease out the information that we all need to plan strategically. but it really depends on what the ultimate goal is. If you want to focus very narrowly, or if you want to look at like what Mark did with statewide coordination as a whole. I think there are lots of different approaches. So we thought we would come up with just a few questions for you guys to all ponder. We are nearing the end of our presentation, so this is a great time for you to ask questions or turn on your camera and have a discussion. Kate?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to just comment back on something that Erin was talking about too, just for a little more context. You know, she was talking about communications, and it's a great example of, you know, we did a strategy that identified communications and the need to do a communications plan as one of her programmatic goals, one of the things that would be most impactful in the state of Montana. And then in building the communications plan, we talked about these feedback loops where, you know, it wasn't just about blasting out data and information. It was about paying attention to, you know, how is that being received? How is it being understood? Are people onboarding this? And so what she's talking about, you know, the canary in the coal mine there, is it's a perfect example of how that changed behavior and operations within her group. You know, suddenly they were paying attention to, okay, these are the signals that are indicating, you know, that people are confused about that data set or that process. Maybe we need to change something in about how we are delivering this, or how we're presenting it, or how we're supporting it. And it's just going to help them get better and better over time.
Yeah, it's easy to get stuck and look at things through one lens. I think the process helps us to broaden our perspective on what it is that's happening that can help us meet our goals. I think that's an important piece.
Yeah.
I'll give everybody just a minute. We do have one more cameo. And I think we're ready. I don't see anything else in the chat. So we'll go ahead and let Natalie
I think in a lot of ways,
share wisdom.
your strategic plan can be about confirmation of what you already know. And I think lots of us go into the process being like, we just want something to say what we know on paper, realistically. But what I love about the process of strategic planning is that it teases out priorities and possibilities, and it puts them into a structure that is operational.
Well said, Natalie.
Exactly. Very well said. So we do have comments, questions.
I'm reading one from Michelle here.
That's excellent. And Megan commented on Kim's as well. Megan, do you have anything that you'd like to say to the whole group outside of the chat?
Specific to Kim's question, it was interesting because the timeline for us was really good. And I would imagine for you guys, like obviously the seasonal approach might take effect, right? You don't want to do stuff during the hurricane season. So sometimes it was us that took a little bit of time to kind of have to, let me think about this and let me see how this works. We did have to do some vetting at the top of some final priorities to be sure that everything would fly through the governor's office and not be something that we didn't want to talk about, for example, because there are some things that are internal that come out of these planning processes. But so able to do that, the surveys and the one-on-one interviews that the team did were extremely effective, and they summarized everything very well. So we still use some of those quotes, and we'll continue to. The value of the plan I want to talk about real quick, if you guys don't mind.
Mm-hmm.
So our office invested some money to do this process, and the outcome of it really ultimately, part of it ended up being we were able to have a plan that we were able to stand behind, and we made short-term and long-term goals based on the strategic plan. And when people asked us, well, what are you guys going to do in your office? I remember I mentioned earlier that we had to go find funding. And they're like, well, what are you going to do with it? I was like, well, here's a plan. And they were like, oh, great, you have a plan. Cool. They were amazed by the idea of actually having a plan. It brought confidence into our office. And this isn't like a one for one, but we would not have gotten funding for our office had we not done this plan. And and I swear I'm not being paid by Sanborn. We would not have gotten funding because I would not have been as confident as I was when we went to the table to ask for the recommendation for the funding that we needed. I wouldn't have been as confident in if we didn't have the plan. So it turned out to be something close to a $35,000 to one investment. $35,000. I mean, from the small amount of money we spent on the strategic plan to then being able to say, and we have stabilized funding. It is not a direct line. There were a lot of factors involved, but this was a really key piece. So that's one return that we don't talk about much. The other piece I wanted to share is we mentioned here the return on investment. And Phil Worrell sent me a little nudge in the chat. The value and benefit study that our office recently completed with the Sanborn and AppGeo team is a total game changer for us. And that was a good example of the business plan that Kate mentioned. So one of the recommendations that came out of our strategic plan was to do a better job of talking about the value. We need to talk about what we bring to, what's the value. And we didn't want to talk about ROI because that's hard to do in government. And we didn't really have a longitudinal time. I didn't have years to do an ROI. I had a few months. So we did the values and benefits study. The team did an outstanding job. We talked about this a little bit at the NISJIC mid-year meeting. But the amount of money that's invested in geospatial, so for every $1 invested in geospatial in Indiana, we see a $900 return on investment. And that's just one of those calculations that came out of that study. And I'm going to take that to some Senate hearings this fall. And because we have budget hearings coming up about why we should have funding and invest in geospatial. And these are easy talking points that are specific to our state. And I don't know that I can say enough about the importance of showing the value and the return, the utility of investment. Even though it's hard to calculate ROI, there are ways to calculate something. Quantitative review, qualitative review, and then there's a lot of scholarly information out there on this as well.
Yeah, that's incredibly compelling. I think that really does make a big impact, being able to articulate it well and have something to point at. That leads really seamlessly into Taryn's question. Kate, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. And then I want to come back and answer Michelle's as
Yes.
well.
Agreed.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of ROI, I think, again, it depends on if you're looking at trying to quantify the value of a very narrow initiative, like a investment in a data set, or a broad initiative or broad program. So if it's a narrow initiative, an ROI, let's just use imagery as an example, would be looking at, you'd be talking with stakeholders, this is the intensive research part, and saying, okay, without this imagery, how many hours a week would you be spending, doing field work, or, driving around the state to collect this type of information, or, spending, how much would you, if you're talking to a local government, for example, how much would you be spending on imagery to purchase it yourself? So I think it's getting at things that can be quantified. So hours, it is a data set or a tool. Is it reducing the number of hours required to perform a task? Or is it increasing revenue? Often we'll talk with tax assessors, and they'll say, with imagery or with parcel data, we are able to locate properties that are not being taxed or not being properly taxed, and it can increase our revenue X number of dollars. That's kind of a bottom up, where you're like collecting use cases hour by hour, dollar by dollar. Top down would be looking at an overall program and saying, to to a public safety organization, you know, how it is imagery allowing you to having a direct impact on your ability to respond in emergencies, and is that response rate saving lives? And then you're getting into, you know, impossible to do, but the value of human life within a state. And you know that you're getting into big topics, but you're understanding and making a case for why the geospatial information is critical for so many people across the state to just perform the work that is essential to, you know, operating on a daily basis. So it's Taryn, it's really the sort of, I'd say bottom up or top down are kind of the two approaches with the ROI. On the survey questions with, you know, that Michelle had asked about, I think that the core of the questions are really about, you know, understanding awareness of programs. You want to understand if your stakeholders, do they know what the resources are? How are they using those resources? And then are those resources meeting their needs, or is there a gap that needs to be closed? So I know those are not specific questions, but those are kind of the three categories of questions that I would suggest you include in a survey, because those begin to measure where gaps or weaknesses might be.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. Taryn, you started to come on camera and unmute. Did you have something to add?
No, I was just like wanting to say, I like how Kate broke it down very simplistically. And, you know, you can't, like she said, put a value on human life or things like that, but you can put the value on hours worked or hours efficiently used, not having to go out in the field or utilize, you know, in some aspects, whether it's imagery, oblique imagery,
Right.
you know, 3D models, these different types of things. You know, we're now moving towards Esri indoor mapping, you know, safe school initiatives and different things like that. So those are all things that can be pulled into that to look at where that ROI is. I think when you're trying to do it for a whole entire state for all of those, it's good to just focus on whether they're big initiative projects or smaller, like data sets, like you were saying. So yes, thank you. It was very helpful.
Thanks, Taryn.
So we have one last question, and I think we have about 3 minutes. So Kate, Daniel was just out of curiosity, what's the average time frame for refresh? So when you plan and you're looking at, you know, I know in Arizona, we went from a 1-year perspective to a 3-year perspective because we couldn't get to the things in a year. You know, is it 5 years? Is there an average that you've seen?
Yeah, I would say it's typically 3 to 5 years. 5 years is very common. You know, beyond that, things change so much that it's very hard to know what your priorities would be when, you know, technology is gonna be so different in 5 years. So I think that's been a helpful time frame.
Yeah, I would agree. Well, thank you all. It's been a fantastic hour for me. I really appreciate your time and spending today with us. If anybody has any questions, Kate and I are available, and this video will be available through the knowledge base, I think, eventually. Kate?
Yeah, thank you all, and many thanks to Megan and Erin and Mark and Natalie for joining us.
Yes.
And allowing us to capture them on video. So great questions, and happy to continue the conversation.
Yep. Have a great day, everyone.